Welcome to Cricut Design Space Overview, brought to your library through the Guiding Ohio Online Grant. My name is Carol Ann, and I will be taking you through this software that is as of the end of January 2023. I am saying this mostly because Cricut is known for doing frequent updates and changes, so if what you open up in the software looks different from what I'm showing you today, it might just be that there's an update that's gone through that has changed things around, hopefully for the better. Because of that, there are frequent content creators and YouTubers that do more up-to-date videos that you can check out. So feel free to do a simple Google search and look up the year or date of the Cricut Design Space. And there's probably going to be somebody that talks about whatever changes have come through. For the most part, most of the updates are pretty superficial, so what you see today could give you a good foundation moving forward. So let's get started right here on this login page. The libraries have access to the Cricut Design Space Access subscription. So that means that there is free access to the various projects and images and fonts that are included with the subscription. So I'm going to be talking about how you can tell what's a part of the subscription versus not, and also what kinds of things you can use for free with your own Cricut Design Space account. If you are using the Cricut at a library, you will not be able to purchase anything on Cricut. So like your Disney princesses or Star Wars themed things, you would still need to sign in with your own account, and it can be one of those free accounts, and just purchase whatever things that aren't a part of the subscription. So you can kind of look at some of those things here on this home page. So this is what you'll see when you first log into Cricut. And this changes seasonally. So anytime there's new designs, new projects, you can kind of look through the different featured pieces. You can also view various videos that they've uploaded. So they've got their little YouTube channel that you can click on the video and move it around. Now you can actually view those things while you're working on your project, which is really cool. So I definitely encourage you to check out this section and kind of sift through and see what is new. They also feature projects that other creators have made and shared in the community, so you can see some of the employees' creations and things like that. So definitely spend some time each time you log in to see what is new. The first thing before I really get into our stuff is up in this top right where it says Maker here. This is actually where you set your machine that you're designing for. Now, some of the machines have different tool capabilities than others, like the Cricut Joy. You can really only use the pen and the fine point blade. It's the much smaller machine, so it's great for little cards or vinyl. They have long strips of vinyl, like if you want to do a long wall decoration or something like that. The Cricut Joy is for there. If you've got the Explorer or the Explorer family, like any of these Explorer Air 2 or things like that, those are going to be your machines that they don't have access to a lot of the specialty tools like the rotary fabric cutters or things like that. It's mostly your fine point blades, your markers, and your scoring tool. It's a scoring stylus that you can use with that one. The Maker series, that's the one that has the much more specialized tools. So like your engraving tools, your embossing, debossing tools, the rotary fabric cutter like I mentioned. The biggest difference between the regular Cricut Maker and the Maker 3 is that the Maker 3 is able to use the smart materials. So it's that long strip of materials again. So yeah, because the tools that are available change depending on what machine you're using, you want to make sure you select your machine first. I'm using a Cricut Maker. And you have that machine selected so that when you start a new project right here in the upper right hand corner, it gives you that option. So that opens up all of the different types of things that I can use with that machine. Okay, now as I'm explaining things, I'm going to be jumping around a little bit. In your handout that is available with this class, you will have the different sections kind of explained a little more. This class is primarily just to get you accustomed to like the general ideas of things that you can use with the Cricut and how you're using the software. It is by no means a full in-depth view of it, but hopefully it's a nice kind of surface level introduction so that you can maybe pick one thing and dive a little deeper into it. So just to kind of get you started, the first part that I'm going to show you is this 3 lines up here. So these 3 lines are our hamburger menu. That opens up our menu of options. If you need to sign out of your account, maybe you're using the library account and you need to purchase something in your personal account, you can sign out here with these 3 lines. This is also where you can flip between that home page where we just were and your canvas where we are with the grid here. So those are the primary places, things that I use that menu for. If you do purchase any of the Cricut products, you can do the brand new product setup there as well. So that is our 3 lines. The next one below it is new, and that is if you have anything going on the canvas, it just kind of wipes it clean and you kind of start with a fresh empty canvas. So I'm going to show you when I do our template here. Now the first thing I want to point out is my little grid, and you can see it goes 1, 2, 3. So this is just an inch sort of measurement scale. Now templates are something special. This scale, as you can see when we're looking at the screen, it's not a literal inch. It's just kind of a visual representation of an inch. So when you're designing, it's really kind of difficult to have an idea of that scale as you're zooming in and out. So that means that they have these templates. So the templates give you the ability to have kind of a scale representation of something maybe that you're designing for. Maybe it's a t-shirt or a candle. They have like the different bags or crock pots, all kinds of things. So the really cool thing is if you do some of these garments, so let's look at this baseball t-shirt. You can see here it says templates are for reference only and will not save with your project. So that means that when we save our project, that template's not going to show up when we pull it up later. We would have to go back into templates and then make our selections to be able to see this reference point again. It doesn't send to the machine, it doesn't cut anything. This is purely a way for you to visualize your project. Now up at the top, you can see there's a couple of different options to change this. So you've got your type. So when I click on the drop down for type here, you can see I've got men's, I've got women's, I've got kids. So depending on what style of shirt you're using, you can also change the size, you can do custom. So that way you have a better idea of how big of a surface you're designing for. The other thing you can do is you can change the color. So maybe you're designing for a dark blue shirt or a light pink shirt, and you want to think of what colors or layers will look good on that surface. So that's where they give you that ability to kind of visualize what that looks like. Down here in the bottom right, you can see that there's an eye, and you can see this is our layer that shows our template. And if you wanted to say, see what your project looks like without using your template there, you can turn off by clicking this eye. And that works for any layer. If you see that little eye, you can turn it on and off. So that way you can either get it out of the way and see it. You'll also notice up here, you see our grid has changed from 1 and now it's actually 4. So it's made that scale much bigger. So that's something to kind of pay attention to as you're working, because what you think your size is might not actually be what that grid is showing. Okay, so to get rid of this template, I'm just going to say new. If I didn't want to use it anymore at that point, I could just turn off the eye. But for this, I'm going to just clear it out completely and start new. So that's a good example of how our new button works. Okay, next underneath our templates is our projects. Projects are any of the start to finish completed ideas for things that the Cricut company and community has shared. So these are all kinds of different things. You can see 3D projects. You can also browse by different categories. And this is where your knowledge of how that Cricut subscription works comes into play. You see this little kind of green flag with the cursive A. That means that it's a part of the Cricut Access subscription. So that means that when you're using the subscription, it's included. You don't have to pay any extra. So if you're coming into the library, you have a subscription yourself, all of those different things are included. Now this one doesn't have an A, but if I click on it, I don't see a cost. So it's probably one of the free projects that are available. And you can see if you've got the free account, you can actually go down here and search by free. So then here's all of these different projects that you could still do, and be mindful of kind of what you're choosing and finding. So keep an eye there. One way to see, I'm going to look at all categories again, and I'm just going to search Star Wars, because I know that that is kind of a proprietary company piece, so any project is going to have a little price here. So in the lower left of this little box, I see it's $1.99 for this card. You can flip through different pictures, you can see kind of an overview of what it is, and so it's giving you all of the different cutout shapes for this project, and all of those things are included. Also, when you're looking at projects, you can see all the different materials that they used for this, as well as other extra things, like whether it's a different mat, different tools. You can see they've got the 5-point pen that they're using. They also give the assembly and instructions here. And let me go back and find one of the ones that was a little more dimensional. Here we have our little nutcracker. So this one I knew they have kind of assembly instructions. So it shows you all the different pieces, parts, as well as how they get glued together. So looking in these completed projects, it really gives you a nice idea of what it's going to take to do this project start to finish. So they do a really good job of that. You can also print those descriptions and things if you want. Like it also gives you an idea of how advanced it is. So when you find a project like this, you have two options. Sometimes you only have the one. But the two options typically are that you can make it with this green button. So if I click on make it, it's going to send it directly to my Cricut cutting machine and lay everything out for the different mats and colors. It's all sized how it was designed to be. So if I wanted to just have all of those materials, I could just start cutting right away. So I'm going to cancel this for now. The other option, say you wanted just the hat because you were going to put it on a teddy bear instead of the nutcracker. You could say customize instead. Or maybe you want the nutcracker to be smaller. Maybe it's too big for the project that you're wanting to do. That's where you could select your whole project and then you could scale it down however much you want it to go. Or you can find the different layers and turn off parts that you don't want or need. So you could go through and use that eye like I showed you and turn off anything that you don't want to cut at that time. Maybe you don't have the paper for it or something like that. So that is how you can customize a project. So if you see a project that has maybe just one component that you like, don't be shy about just kind of scavenging parts here and there. You don't have to do that entire project to get it. You can just use that individual component and customize it how you need to. So that is our projects. And here again, I'm just going to say new, and I'm going to replace it. Because I did have something on the canvas, I'm going to say replace. So it takes me back to that new canvas. So that is our projects, and you can search other terms and all kinds of different things with those different categories like we just did. You can also actually bookmark or favorite some of these as well to come back to them at a later time. So I'm going to click on this and go back to my canvas. The next section here is our shapes. So you can see we've got free shapes up here, and then we have shapes that are a little more ornate and they're in the subscription. So if you use any of those, make sure that you're using the subscription account if you have access to that. To use a shape, you just click on it and then it shows up on your canvas. Then once it's there, you can increase the size. If you have it selected and go out from a corner, you can see you've got this curved double arrow to rotate it. You can also change its color by clicking on this colored square in the operation box up here. So you can see it's a different color. You can also change its operation type. These shapes automatically come out as a basic cut, or you can change it to be drawn with a pen or create score lines. You can even have it print then cut, so it would print that colored heart and then cut it out. So if you didn't have that color paper, you could do that as an option. The other thing that you can do with shapes is you can have these shapes that are super basic. So I've got this other heart, and I'm going to use my duplicate button over here and just press that a couple of times. And you can rotate shapes and use them sort of like little building blocks. So just because you only have a handful of shapes, you can change them and manipulate them to create new shapes. So I've put these 3 hearts together, and if I click and drag a square around them, it highlights all 3 of these layers over in our layer tab on the right side. And I can do a couple of different things. It used to be that you could just weld them, and weld was something that was irreversible. Like the only way to undo it would be to directly undo it. If you did anything after that, then you couldn't undo it. The new feature that they have now that's similar to weld is it's all under this combine. So unite is the most similar to weld, where you've got the one shape, but you still have access to these other shapes. So maybe I want to rotate this a little bit more. and then it looks a little more even. So by using the combine feature, that gives you the ability to kind of tweak and adjust shapes. You can also tell it to undo the unite. You can also merge layers, so that becomes that kind of individual permanent shape as well. So if I merge this, you can see in my layers palette, it turns into one layer. So that's our merge. The other thing that you can do is that, say you want like a little frame, and you want to cut another shape out of it. I'm going to change the color so you can see this. There's again a couple of ways we can do this. We can layer them like this. And the feature that you can use to cut this star shape out of this box, one option that they used to have, if you're working with only 2 layers, so we've got just the star and just our square, you can highlight those 2 layers or select them in your layers panel over here, and then you can do what's called slice. Now slice works just like a cookie cutter. You can see now I have 3 different layers. I've got my cookie cutter, so my original star shape, and then I have the star shape that it cut out of the square. Now it will keep that shape, and if I go to make it, it's going to have both the box with the star as well as the star that it cut out, as well as the cookie cutter star. So that's the big thing. If you don't want that, you can click on it and tell it to delete. Say you don't need your other star shape, you can delete that. So that's where you can cut it out, but then you have those extra things. And here again, it's not really something that's reversible, unless you want to go back and undo, but then it's undoing all of those steps in between. The other thing that you can do, we're back to our star and our square. If I highlight these, one of the new features of combine is that you can do subtract. So I can tell it to subtract. So then it gets rid of that cookie cutter as well as the shape in between, because you're taking that out. It's almost like having a sponge that's kind of taking everything away. The neat thing, again, just like we had before, we can adjust those and see what kinds of changes and edits we want to make, and we can really kind of play around with those and adjust. So that is how you can do slice and combine. If you are doing something that has more parts, like say you want to do a couple of shapes being cut out of one. So say I want to cut out a diamond and a star from our heart here. If I tried to do slice, I have more than 1 or 2 layers. I've got more than 2 layers, so slice isn't even an option. We can still do our subtract, so we can still do that, but we cannot do slice. If you absolutely want to do slice, what I recommend is that you select, and I can hold down the shift button and click on each one I want, and I can tell it to weld those 2 shapes. So you see I've got, this is one shape, but this is still all on one layer now. You can see I've got both of those shapes on one layer. So that's how I welded those, so that they're one layer, and when I select the heart and our star and diamond, now there's only 2 layers. So now I can use that slice feature if I wanted to. So those are kind of some general ideas of how to use some of those basic tools. with our shapes. The other part that's in our shapes, I'm going to click and use my little trash can here. Say I wanted to have a score line and fold this. You also have score lines here in our free section. So this little line is going to give you a fold line. You can see when it's on there, it's this dashed line. So however long this is will be where that score tool will run across your piece. And that's really handy, like if you're doing cards or like more three-dimensional things like our little nutcracker. It gives you a nice clean fold line. The one thing to note is just putting it on top of a shape like this, moving it there, it's not going to stay put. So if I go to make it, here I have my little score line, but then my shape is over here. So in order for that to actually score that line onto this shape, I have to highlight both of these, and then I'm going to go down here and tell it to attach. So that means that this line gets scored on top of this shape. So if I go to make it, now you see I've got my dotted line over my shape. So that will work the same way if you're wanting to draw lines on a shape or score lines on a shape. That is how those things work. Now if you say you have a couple of these, so I'm going to use my duplicate button again, and you want to make sure that these all stay the same size because they're going to be a part of something, and you're going to make another part that's different. You can highlight each of these and tell it to group. So now if I change the scale of it, it all groups together, it moves together. So that is our group button in the top right here. If I wanted to ungroup, say I wanted only 2 instead of 3 in there, I can ungroup and then group just 2. When you have things group and you click on our duplicate, that duplicates both of those. So those are our group and our attach. So those are great ways of working with shapes and really kind of changing them around to what you need. There's a lot you can do. There's also the 2 other forms of combine that I encourage you to play with, but they are definitely a little different in how they function, so I encourage you to play with those. I also have them explained a little more clearly in the handout, so feel free to check that out. So let's move on to the next spot. We have our images. So images, there's tons and tons of different categories. You can choose one of those. You can also search a different one. So I'm just going to look up books. And here again, you can see there's our subscription. So we can choose ones with those. You can see that there's different colors. There's also different operations and things. So you can really limit your search a bit with some of these different filters. So one of the things that I like to do is I'll select the operation type. Like if I know I'm going to be cutting it out of vinyl and I'm not going to do print then cut, then I'll select cut only. And so it's only going to show me things that are intended to be cut out shapes. If, say, I did want to do print then cut because I wanted more advanced shapes, here's where you can get into some interesting ones. And here's another great example of different images that are not a part of the subscription. So you can see our little A is there, but that price is crossed out. But here's these other paid versions that I would have to use a personal account to purchase those. So they have all kinds of fun things, and then they have other ones that are are not a problem. Now when you purchase something, any of these designs, you can change the size, you can do different things with it. It's also something that's just a part of your account that you can use as many times as you like. So once you've made that purchase, it's just like having a cookie cutter or something. You can keep using it as much as you like. So that is something to keep in mind, that if it's something you know you're going to use again and again, it's a good investment. So that is one of your options there. So I'm just going to show you kind of what this is like to select an image. So when you click on an image, you can see there's this green box that shows up around it. Now that shows that it's one of the things that I've picked. It also shows up on the bottom here. So maybe I don't want that one, I can click on the X here. Or if I clicked on something that I don't want, I can click on it again. So you can actually go through and select several different designs, and you can see they all kind of show up down there. You can also look up other things and keep pulling in images that you want to use for a project. So you can see how each of these are up here. So I'm going to show you how to bring those in. Now you can go and click on Add to Canvas in the bottom right. So it's going to bring in all of those different images, and you can see they're all really, really big. And when I click and move them, they're all moving together. So I'm going to scale these down a little bit. They're all kind of scaling together. Then I'm going to click in an empty space. So that deselects them, so that I can go over and grab individual ones and kind of separate the different things out. So something to note is that if I click on my butterflies here, it shows up, and here this book is made of 3 different layers, and I can turn off the different color layers and see what it looks like. So that is one way to tell like what is making that design. One clue is that they're different colors. You can also change the different colors like we did with our shapes. So if I change to a different color, then those things would go onto a different mat. The other neat thing that you can do, maybe you like the books but maybe you don't want the little flower, is that this one is only 1 layer. And down here in the bottom right, there's this contour. So if I click on contour, I can actually hide all of the different contour cuts. And basically a contour is any time your pen or your blade puts down and then picks back up. So a closed in shape or line is a contour. Now, if I didn't want to use that little flower, I could click on that on the picture or in this list of items. If I didn't want most of it, I could say hide all, and if I close this, you'll see it's just that big block shape. But if I click on contour again, I can say show all and just get rid of that one little flower shape instead. So you can see now there's that flower shape is gone. So that's one way if, say, you found this reading is my jam and you want it to say something else. This one, reading, is already separated out, so you could just close the eye on it. But if it's included, oh, it looks like this one's also separate too. So you can close those. So if you have them all in 1 layer, that's where you would use your contours. That's really handy if you have other things in a design that you don't want, but you want to put in your own thing. Maybe you want to put in a family name or something like that. So that is how you can edit contours. So that's super duper handy. So I'm going to get rid of some of these. I'm going to highlight all of those and get rid of those. Okay, so that's our images. The next thing we have is our text. So text is pretty nice. They've changed it so now you're editing directly in the text. And you can double click to edit it, and you can change your font. So font is up here. You can also change your style, size, letter spacing, line spacing, alignment, curve, and advanced is if you wanted to separate each letter out and change them individually. So for this, I wanted to show you how to change your fonts. And what's really handy is they've made it so that your font box can actually move now. So you can move that out of the way so you can see. And here again, you have your different Cricut subscription fonts that you can change to. They also have other paid fonts. Another feature that they've added recently is that there's this section for your system fonts. So if you have fonts on your computer that you use frequently, that is how you can use those for free. So if you have any fancy fonts loaded on your computer, that is one way to work with those. So I definitely encourage you to play with those. There's, again, different filters that you can use, like if you wanted to use the writing tool, maybe you're having it write a message with the marker, you can look up just writing fonts, and then it will give you those lines that it's going to write with instead. Okay, so now that I have a writing font, and here you can see in style, it's listed as writing. So that's going to tell it to use a marker or a pen. And I can tell that by looking at my operation up here in the top left. So it says pen. And one of the things you can do is that when you have it on pen, you see my color box is actually like empty in the middle. So that shows that it's a line instead of a filled in shape. You can change the size of pen that you're using. So sometimes I'll use a 1mm marker instead of the 0.4mm fine point. So it gives you an idea of how thick that line's going to be on your design. They also have the different colors. So say you wanted to say a couple of different words and you want them in different color markers. When you put them in the different colors, it will actually separate that option, that operation out for you, so that it will be kind of a separate step. So that's one of the major differences for changing the colors on something, is if you want the machine to stop writing and use a different marker, it doesn't actually matter what color it is in real life. Your machine has no way of knowing. Same thing with the colors of paper. Or other materials you're cutting out, but it just kind of separates the steps so that you can do that. Now, if for whatever reason you wanted it all in the same color, there's this really cool feature called Color Sync. So up here, oh, it doesn't work for that. I will show you another part that uses Color Sync. So if I do our images and I grab my book and I add that to my canvas, and I do one of these shapes, at first glance you would think that those are both just black shapes. But in reality, if I look at my color sync here, it's actually a kind of a charcoal black and then a really dark black. So that's where, if I intended them to be the same color, I don't have to go through and individually change the color on each one with the block up here. I can actually drag this whole color up into this other color, and now they're all the same. So before, if I had made it, you would see it would be on two different mats. So now if I go back and I merge those colors together and I make it's all on one mat. And look here, here's the other thing where that reed is not in the same place. So if I was doing that out of vinyl, I would want that to stay put. So even though this is all on kind of one grouped layer, you might still have to use that attach like we used with our score line to get that to stay put. So now that I've clicked on attached, and you can also detach if you don't want it there, maybe you want to make some changes, maybe move it down or something. But I've attached that reed to that shape, so now when I say make it, here it is. It's staying in place in that design. So that is our color sync and our attach again. So that was our text and changing some of those options. So let's move on to the next part, and that is our phrases. So a lot of people have really found a lot of need for doing phrases. Phrases, when you have a picture that has text on it, like these here, one of the big differences is that this is more like word art. It's not actually editable. It's not like working with a text tool. It's not a font. It's just a picture of a word. So if I brought this over, I would not be able to change it, even some of these simple ones. And like these fancy fonts here too. The one thing that they've done, and I'll get into this next, is that they've started creating editable images. So if you see something with this blue highlighted text, that means that that is actually editable. So I'll show you these first ones here and add those to my canvas. And here, if I click on them, you can see I don't get any of those text tools. I can change the scale of it, and even this is like that other background shape. So I can change the scale of our text here. You can edit the contours. So maybe you just want birthday or just the happy. You can turn off each of those shapes to get rid of those. So if I close that again, you can see I've got just that and then the day. So you can use the contours to edit it, but you can't really change the lettering or things like that. Same thing with this. You've got different layers for the colors and interactions, but you can't really change the word. So that's where we've got our phrases. You can look up different phrases. You can do the options for limiting what designs. You can also change the language, which is really cool. So those are different features that they've added. But if you want to be able to edit it, that's where you would go under editable images. So that's where you're going to find things like your little letter logos, or like in this book, you see this blue text in here. You can change those. So all kinds of different things. They're kind of doing some of the design work for you in terms of picking what fonts go together, in terms of building like different relationships and different ideas. So you've got like this official taster, but then you can change what's in the middle. So if we go over here, and we're adding these, and here again I'm just going to scale these down a bit. And something to note with scale is that you can change it by grabbing the corners and it tells you what size it is here, or you can distort the size by unlocking it up here, or you can set a specific size for it. If you distort with the unlock, that means that it's going to not scale evenly. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. So I'm going to put in, let's just say candy. So this is where it's kind of moving it a little bit. You might have to adjust things. You might have to adjust the fonts. The other thing is with these script fonts, it would actually cut all around each of the letters. So you would want to click on that layer once you have it edited the way you want it, and you would want to weld that font so that it's all one shape and it doesn't cut out everything separately. So there are some extra steps, but people wanted to be able to change what words in there and not have to find what font they used and things like that. So that's where you have the option to edit certain things. And if things don't fit, that's where you would have to kind of change those things there. So that is our editable images. The next part that we have is our upload. So upload is where you would put any of the designs that you have either created yourself in another design software. I use Google Drawings a lot because it gives me a transparent background and I can work with my own photographs and different things from my Google Photos. So you can use different free options like that. This is also where you would upload if you purchased a SVG file from, say, an Etsy artist or creator. We have if you came to our November lamp centerpiece, this is how we uploaded it there. In terms of what file works best, I would say if you have the option to have an SVG, that is awesome and great. It makes it super easy. The next one I would go for is if you have the option to have a PNG with a transparent background. That's also a great option. But if, say, for whatever reason you only have a JPEG, you can use tools like their magic wand or eraser to kind of erase around things that you don't want to include in your picture or design. So you do have some options to kind of work with different images and things. This is definitely a lot more involved process, so if you would like to learn more about that in the near future, feel free to make a one-on-one appointment with me, or it might be something that we can cover in the future. So that is our uploads. And it works just like our other designs. You can click on it and then add it to Canvas. So you can do different options there. So that is our uploads. And then the last part that's over here on the left on our toolbar is our monogram. So the monogram is a feature that they have started beta testing. And that means that it's still kind of in the works for things. Apparently there's been enough people doing like wedding gifts or invitations and things where they want to create a monogram. And how this works is that you put in whatever initials you want to use, and then you can choose your theme or style. You can add different borders, different fonts. And what this does is it does the design work of changing the scale of the letters, changing the order of the letters for projects like this. You can also change what kind of operation, whether it's just cut or cut and draw. So I definitely encourage you to kind of play with this feature. Know that it is a new kind of in progress kind of thing. Once you've kind of created whatever design you enjoy that you want to use, then you can add it to your canvas, and it would work just like it would for either you're adding an image and the different layers. So like this one is going to draw this with a pen, so I could add that to another shape or things. And this is purely just kind of a faster way to create a simple monogram because people were using for that. The other thing that I want to point out down here, I'm going to put an image there again, is that we have our zooming in and out. So I can zoom in, or if it's really big, like if I've got my nutcracker, I can use our zoom in and out here. And we can move around our canvas with our little bars. So that's all of the different pieces, parts, and we kind of went over our layers and our layer tabs. If I put a couple more items over here, the other thing that you can do is you can actually move our layers around. So if I put some text on top of my heart, oh, and this one merged in with this design, so I'm going to move that separate. Turn my heart a little lighter color and say I want this text on here. If the heart was above it, maybe I made it later, you can move it around so you can see. If you don't see something under a project, you might have to check your layers as to where it might be hiding instead. If you don't want to see something on your canvas, or if you don't want it to make, but you want to use it later, you can close the eye on it. And you can see it's just kind of grayed out and hidden there. Or maybe you don't want to use a portion of it or one of the layers, you can close the eye on that. So that is our layers. We've talked about our group and ungroup and our delete, and we've gone through all of these down here. So the next part up here, say you've created as a design and you've started it, maybe you want to come back to it later, then that's where you would click on save, and you can give it a name if it's going into a collection. If you're using the public account, you want to make sure that you have a name that you're going to remember. For the most part, working with a public account, everyone that logs into that account has access to it. So if you just want to have the things in there that you want to use and then delete them when you're done, just make sure you're only deleting the things that you're working on and just leave other people's things alone. So I can just say test. And now you see I have the save button. So if I save that, you can see it was successfully saved. So if you're coming back and you're wanting to create something, you can say my stuff. And that was also available on the home. And you can see here I have this, my test that was saved. Say you're done with it and you don't need it anymore, you can say delete project. And then say delete. So that's where you can work with all the different projects. You can lay out the different pieces, parts for your designs there. So you've got tons of great options for working with that. This is also where your bookmarks, you could review the things that you liked in the projects and want to come back to, so you can see. This Jennifer Maker, she is an awesome creator. She also does a lot of really great tutorial videos on YouTube for Cricut. So definitely check out their stuff. So that is my stuff on our Cricut. The next part, so that's kind of like a good overview of how to use different pieces, parts in the software and what the different sections do. The next part that I really want to show you is if I'm going to make this, and let's tell this to attach. Oops. I want to attach you and attach you. This flatten is one that I haven't really gone over. That simply turns that into a print and cut. So if I wanted this to be a sticker instead of a cutout with marker drawn on it, that's what that flatten does. That's a little more advanced feature, but it's something else. So I'm going to go over here and make it. And the thing that I want to show you here is that you have options to move things around on your mat. You can't change the size, but you can change the rotation of where it fits. This is really, really great if you have scraps of material. You can cut things out of the different scraps and match up where they are on your canvas, on that grid on your mat, and where they are on the software. If you are doing a vinyl heat transfer, say we're going to do a heat transfer for this reed, then this is where you would mirror it, because that heat transfer needs to be mirrored because you're cutting through the glue side instead of the good side on your design. So this is where you mirror, is here. You can also change your mat size or material size. You can also see what the different features are for what you're working with. You can also change the number of copies that you're doing. So if I say I want 2 of each of these, then I can move these around to get the spacing that I want. It's going to do its best to put everything in the upper left-hand corner to kind of save materials, but if there's space that it could rotate around in, like we've got our hearts here, like if I rotate this heart, I'd be able to fit more. So the software doesn't really know how to do something like that. It'll just keep putting things together kind of in the same orientation as it originally is designed for. So that's where you kind of have to decide, okay, do I want to attach these together before I send it, or do I want to kind of fuss around with these mats? So that's an option. Say you wanted to put this in the same black material, you could actually move this object or hide it. Maybe you only wanted 1 extra of these pieces, so you could hide it. And you can see I've got 1 hidden piece down here. So if I click on it, it comes back. Or I can click on it and say move object. And now if I move it from the pink mat and I put it over on the black mat, now I've got this heart shape on the black mat as well. So I could fit that in here if I wanted to. So I've got that in there. So that's kind of something to keep in mind, that you can move things around between the different mats. You can see there's this red line that's kind of your safety from that edge, because you never want a blade to cut in from the very edge of the paper, because the chances of it getting caught and just lifting up and jamming are really high. You always want your piece to be a little bit away from the edge that you're cutting on. So if you're using scraps, that's something to keep in mind. Okay, so the next part that we're going to look at, oh, it's not, so for whatever reason my machine wasn't letting me actually go forwards to cut anything. So I'm just going to put a couple of things down here and see if it'll let me make it now. Oh, okay. So now we've got all the stuff on our 2 mats, and we can tell it to continue. So that's a good reason to actually save your project before you make it, because you never know if it's gonna have problems or not. Now at this point, in order to get to this step, you want to make sure that your machine is connected to your computer or your device in order to get these options. So you can choose which one you're working with. You also have the option to kind of go back and edit things or turn on that mirror if you need to until it's done. This is also where you can select your materials. So you can have the popular materials, but if you don't have the material that you're going to be using, you can go up here to browse all materials. So when you're working with these machines, you want to make sure that you're using whatever setting for whatever material you're using. So if you're using a board or a certain weight cardstock, make sure that you match that, because what that is doing is it's changing what tool you're using, how many times it cuts around that shape, as well as how much pressure it's giving. So say we're going to cut this out of heavy cardstock. If you're cutting fabric, there's tons and tons of different fabric, so you have those options. And so I can choose my heavy cardstock. You can also change, like maybe your blade is brand new, you can tell it to use less pressure to kind of increase the length of your blade life. You could say more pressure if you're using an older blade. The other thing, if you have the option, there's this edit tools, and let me actually go back, and I'm gonna add a score line because I know that gives me that tool edit option. So I'm just going to add this little score line to my heart. I'm sizing it down, and then I'm highlighting both of those just by clicking and dragging, and I'm saying attach. So now when I go to make it, and I can say continue, it's connecting to my machine. I can use that cardstock. If you have something that you favorited, you can bookmark it. So if you use something frequently, you can bookmark those by using the little bookmark here. So if you're doing a lot of Velcro or something like that, or like the felt, you can also look by category. Like we were doing some premium holographic vinyl, so I can choose those. So all kinds of fun stuff. Alright, so I'm going to go back to, and if you want to go back, you can click on that name and change your material if you chose the wrong ones for whatever reason. Okay, so here's where I can choose what tool I'm using. So I can tell it whether I want to use the double scoring wheel because it's a thicker material. I can go back to a single scoring wheel because those are the two options for that on our Cricut Maker. Or I could use the scoring stylus, which goes in that first section. So if I change it to scoring stylus, I can say apply. So now it's telling me what clamp to put in what tool and what button to push. This is where it's really nice. It tells you each step that you're going to do, and it will kind of identify most of the tools and kind of separate each step if you need to change the tool. So like if I'm using the scoring wheels, they go in the same clamp, and then I would put the fine point blade in. So that's where it would kind of break up those steps and change it. So that is the basics. I'm going to cancel out of here, and that's how you choose your materials, and you can edit what tools if it's a possibility. And I hope that you guys kind of get inspired about some of the ideas that you can start working with. There's definitely a lot more features that this can do and ways that you can design and work this software. So hopefully you get a good little start in your adventure with Cricut cutting and machines. Just know that your more than welcome to sign up for a one-on-one time with me. Check with your library for your tech appointments that are possible. They can be for a half an hour or an hour. You're more than welcome to bring your own computer or device if you want to work with your own project and materials. If you're going to the North Canton Library, you're more than welcome to use our Cricut cutting machine there. They have a Cricut maker. You would just bring whatever material you want to cut, or if you want special markers or things to draw, that is what you would bring. We have the basic tools and the basic mats that you can use there, all for free. You don't even have to have a library card, but it's good to have a library card to sign up on the computer. All right. I hope that you enjoyed this class, and I look forward to seeing you around the library in the future. Okay, happy making!